Every month, I make a matchup chart with feedback from high-level reps of their mains, and for the past few months, y'all have been super vocal about wanting to see Fleet next. Today, I'll be breaking down Fleet's winning, even, and losing matchups, while explaining intricacies to them and giving tips to overcome even the hardest of fights, even as someone like Fleet. Before we get started, I do want to note that Fleet is currently not a super dominant fighter. She has a lot of diversity and unique tools in her kit, but that can lead to matchups being really in her favor, or really rough for her. Let's go ahead and get started with her easiest matchups and work our way down to the hardest ones. Today, unfortunately, Etalus is our easiest matchup. Fleet's tools allow her to both keep Etalus at bay, while also pushing advantage on him harder than anyone else, except maybe our next character. Truthfully, Etalus's recent buff to dash attack allows him to break projectiles with it and does a lot in this matchup, but it's simply not enough for him to keep Fleet from thawing out his troublesome disadvantage. His big body makes chaining aerials together especially easy for Fleet, since it's a lot easier to hit someone as big as a barn like Etalus compared to someone like Ranno, especially with her up strong. Once Etalus is hit by one of these, it's pretty easy to play a point-and-click adventure and chain together a few to snag an early kill. Looping back to neutral though, playing patient and forcing Etalus to approach is always pretty easy in this matchup. You should remember to play this matchup pretty grounded so you have the opportunity to parry projectiles. This will let you approach the matchup with a much more defensive style, that then allows you to capitalize on Etalus's poor disadvantage whenever you get a win in neutral. Before we move on to the next character, remember that Etalus's upbeat is immune to projectiles while it's rising. It's really easy to line up a Nair or Bear at the apex of his hop, or even use tools like a Fair just to slowly take away his resources. I suggest going for these instead of something like a forward strong or a side B to punish them off stage, since they're a lot more inconsistent here. Up next, we have Kragg. This is probably Kragg's worst matchup overall, so if you're looking to counter him, I suggest giving Fleet a try. For similar reasons to Etalus, Kragg gets comboed more or less forever once Fleet gets a hit. I mentioned using Fair to take away Etalus's resources when recovering, and the same applies here. It's really easy to get an early stock off Kragg just by limiting what he can do off stage. Obviously, you do have to win neutral first to get Kragg off stage, but that's not even super hard in this matchup. His slower speeds make it hard for him to close gaps on Fleet, allowing her to take her time in neutral and not feel too pressured. Her lightweight can be a problem in this matchup since Kragg can easily steal away a stock, so I suggest taking advantage of your defensive options in neutral and playing this one pretty slow. As long as you abuse his slow speed and make yourself hard to hit, it should be pretty easy to do. Before we move on to our even matchups, I just wanted to hop in here really quickly to ask you to leave a like or subscribe if you're enjoying the content. I fund all my Wi-Fi and local events in East Texas from these videos, so any support to the algo helps a ton. Thanks a ton for watching, and let's get back to the matchup chart. Moving on to our even tier, we're going to start off with Loxodont. Lox's heavy weight and big body give him similar issues to Kragg and Etalus in this matchup. However, his floatiness does let him bounce out of disadvantage a little easier than the others. His big axe can also prove to be an issue, since it outranges Fleet by a good bit, making it easier for him to poke her than the other way around. This forces Fleet to have a more well-rounded neutral, instead of being able to capitalize on pure passiveness. And while you still can play passive, overly relying on it in this matchup will only allow Lox more space to corner you with his big hitboxes. This doesn't mean this matchup is all doom and gloom, however, since Lox's slower frame data allows you to mash on him a bit easier than some of the other faster fighters. And his poor recovery makes him super easy to poach with a few down airs at any percent. If you're having trouble in this matchup, I suggest learning how to crouch cancel and whiff punish some of his faster, grounded options. The punish windows are pretty tight, so they don't seem supernatural, but they're there, and you can turn a situation of you being pressured into an advantage state if done right. Next up, we have everyone's favorite friend, Orcane. Orcane's pretty stubby, meaning that Fleet's disjoints can wall him pretty well, but his burst speed with his wave dash is really fast, allowing him to find gaps in Fleet's neutral where other characters might not be able to. However, his air and ground speeds outside of his big wave dash aren't the greatest, giving Fleet lots of time to pick her options in neutral and play around his stubby hitboxes. Orcane and Fleet both have really strong ledge guarding, but due to Orcane's Puddle and Fleet's Float, both characters have unique ways to mitigate the opponent's tools and make it back to stage safely. Speaking of advantage, Fleet can punish Orcane in the air a lot harder than other characters due to his lacking airspeed and drift. Juggles are really strong on him, letting you get some extra credit on your combos, which is always a plus. One tip for this matchup if you are playing as Fleet is to try and snipe Orcane's jump off stage, since if he can't Orca hop, he'll be forced to wall jump close to the ledge, which you can then punish with a Nair or a Bear. Or he'll have to recover to his Puddle, which should be pretty easy for you to punish due to your sizable moves. For our final even matchup, we have Wrastor. Wrastor is really quick in Slipstream, which can be a little tricky for Fleet to deal with. But without it, he's a bit slow and, between me and you, kinda clunky. This gives Fleet time to pick and choose her options like we mentioned with previous fighters, but also makes walling out Wrastor so much easier in general. Wrastor's lightweight also opens him up to early kills, on stage and off stage, meaning that Fleet doesn't need to win neutral as much to snatch up a stock. Wrastor, however, has some pretty fast frame data and sizable moves, meaning that Fleet's not 100% in the clear here. I like to approach this matchup with more defensive options, however, to patch up these problems, letting Wrastor come to me and make the first move. My big tip for this matchup is to abuse your shield drop aerials. These are great in every matchup since Fleet's Nair is so fast and hits at such a nice angle, but Wrastor's moves can be a bit laggy in some spots, making him vulnerable to a shield drop Nair or Bear where other characters might not be. For a quick little bonus tip, remember to mix Float and how you use it off stage. His downstrong's pretty nasty if you play predictably, but super punishable if you get the jump on him. Moving on to our next tier, we have our hard but even section. These matchups are technically even on paper if you play really well as Fleet, but you have to play pretty pristine to do so. These characters could go in -0.5 or even based on some of our different player responses, so I thought making their own little tier would help keep the video accurate while also letting me fudge the rules a little bit just so y'all know what's going on. To kick us off in this tier though, we have Ranno. Ranno is really quick, with great movement and frame data. This can make the matchup really challenging, however, Fleet's pretty great at playing defensively, making her one of the only characters to give Ranno trouble in finding an opening. This is a pretty general tip for most faster character matchups, but angling your side B up can bluff the initial hit and force opponents to parry, which is really great on characters like Ranno, who are able to pressure Fleet pretty well. It'll make a little bit of extra space for you and help you slow down the matchup. I also suggest using your float to mix up approaches, since Ranno can needle camp, and if he chooses to, it'll force you to rely on weird timings and new ways to play neutral. Overall, this matchup is pretty tricky due to Ranno's immense pressure, but capitalizing on his recovery when he has to rely on a slingshot from a bubble can go a long ways, so be sure to have your ledge guarding lined up just right. Next up in this tier, we have Olympia. She's pretty similar to Ranno in the fact that she's great at closing range for scraps, but she's a little slower with her base speed, in return for better burst movement. Truthfully, how you fight against this doesn't change a lot, since you want to be keeping her at a distance, but incorporating moves like her Fair can always help break her down special armor. Fleet's defensive options also give her a lot of counterplay and interactivity with the crystal, since Olympia normally likes to use the option to brute force her way through neutral. Fleet, however, can normally operate at a range where this is just a little bit less effective, letting her play around the option. Truthfully, this matchup is still evolving since Olympia is so new, and we're still getting pretty sizable balance changes to her, so only time will tell if this matchup stays in the evenish, losing-ish limbo tier. If you're having trouble playing this matchup as Fleet, however, be sure to push Ollie off stage and take aim to take resources instead of the stock. This will allow you to capitalize on her already middling recovery and easily win games. Hopping down to our actual losing tier, let's start with Maypul. Her quick movement is pretty similar to Ranno's in some aspects. However, Maypul's is a lot harder to wall due to her moves all being a good bit faster and her combos laddering Fleet pretty consistently. Her burst movement is also super good, allowing her to close gaps on Fleet pretty consistently, and her Best Bud Lily limits Fleet's movement options. Fleet isn't super fast, which means she can't run up and parry Lily like other characters can as soon as she spawns, so countering the option takes a bit more precise timing to move towards Lily and then get the parry. The matchup isn't hopeless, however. Maypul's recovery is pretty easy to snipe, and her lightweight can allow Fleet to take some early stocks. Sadly, this isn't the norm though, making her beat Fleet pretty consistently. Our other fighter in this tier is Forsburn. Forsburn's big disjoints allow him to both overwhelm Fleet in neutral, while also not having the aspects that hold a character like Loxodont back. His safe aerials and cape allow him to poke at Fleet safely, which is something she would normally prefer to be doing. This forces her to play grounded in order to CC cape, but she really likes to use her landing aerials, making it a bit tricky to navigate neutral in this matchup. Her slow speeds also make it a bit hard for her to fling herself into smoke or outmaneuver Clone, allowing Forrest to play how he'd like while Fleet is stuck playing on the back foot. This matchup's not all doom and gloom, of course. Fleet's projectiles can break Clone and smoke, which is especially good against Forsburn's recovery. Speaking of recovery, this is another matchup where you'll want to slowly take an opponent's options instead of going for an outright kill, since without smoke and Clone, Forrest doesn't have the easiest time making it back. Her side B is a great poke tool, and like I mentioned earlier, it's always great to angle it up, just to keep the opponent from parrying it, which can then force them to not parry a normal side B in the future. For our final tier, the super bad matchups, we'll start with Zetterburn. Zetter's got a pretty abusable recovery, but that's where the good news stops. Everything else about him is super hard for Fleet to deal with. His fireball allows him to poke at Fleet, his good movement and frame data make it hard for Fleet to defend herself, and his high kill power allows him to steal a stock before Fleet is able to take one herself in most scenarios. On top of all of that, his grab game being really strong means that Fleet can't opt out of playing neutral to just plat drop and beat all of his options, since there's always the threat of a wave lane grab that can lead to nasty kill confirms. If you're a Fleet player playing this matchup, be sure to take your time in neutral, since getting hit once can lead to big damage, and that's never fun. I also suggest using Nair to knock Zetter away from the stage once he's off stage, since once he's able to make it to the wall, his recovery becomes a lot better, so be sure to take what you can when he's in a bad position. Our final and hardest matchup is Clairen. Her sword being about as fast as Fleet's bow, while being larger, makes the matchup really risky and tricky for Fleet, since Fleet isn't able to defend herself in the way she'd like, or find openings and gaps in the frame data. Clairen's recovery having a big hitbox above it that breaks Fleet's down air also makes it a little bit tricky to ledge guard her, since you're not really able to take advantage of Clairen off stage in the way you would other characters. Fleet's F-tilt does outrange a good bit of Clairen's kit, so while it's not perfect, I suggest using the move a little more in this matchup than you normally would. I also like to try and mix up my float movement and how I follow the tornado from side B, to try and force Clairen to counter it, allowing me to parry the counter. It's really hard to do, but it's worth learning to make neutral just a little easier for you. Be sure to stay fluid and adaptable in this matchup, since you want Clairen to bring the fight to you, but figuring out how to do that will vary player to player and match to match. That just about wraps up my Fleet matchup chart. Big shout out to my Oomphy Novice for helping me with this one. I've left their socials linked down below in case you want to check them out. Let me know what matchup chart you guys want to see next on the channel. I'm currently wrapping up my semester, which means I'll be able to put more time into these scripted videos once summer's here. I have some cool neat events coming up too that you can check out on my Discord, which is linked below. I think we're going to do some kind of Wi-Fi doubles event and a combo contest or community clip compilation. I haven't decided yet, so let me know which one you guys would prefer. Thanks so much for watching until the end, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now!